Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to evening 3 of the Learning Revolution Conference Online. This is our inaugural conference bringing together thought leaders and practitioners in a variety of learning fields. We're so excited about this, and it's a thrill tonight to have David Loertscher here. David is a friend now, has become a friend, and he is one of the creators or the creator of the Learning Commons idea. I don't know, David, welcome, first off.
Well, thank you very much, Steve.
How much credit do you take for Learning Commons, and how much was collaborative?
In the K-12 arena, we were the originators of this whole idea. We were preceded in the academic library world a bit, but they had quite a different slant to their work. Anyway.
Well, we're sure glad that you have done what you've done. Thanks to ClassFlow and Blackboard Collaborate for their support of this event. This is a labor of love, this particular conference. I'm just so excited about all that's taking place here. And again, it's hard to, may sound like hyperbole, but I feel like this is sort of an historic opportunity to bridge different worlds. Those of you who are in our live audience, thanks for being here. If you look to the left of the map, you'll see some icons. You're looking for the second one down. It's the star. You can double click on it and click on the map. And then go ahead and put in your location. Look at that India and New Zealand. Lovely. India, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea? Look at that, 2 people from Asheville. What a coincidence. Who knew? Hey, Sue, South Korea, how fun. You've made us quite an international group. We're small but mighty tonight. Feel free to keep that chat going. And David is an old hand in Blackboard Collaborate, and so do feel free to use the chat, raise your hand, any other tools that you would like. He's quite an interactive fellow. So David, I'm going to turn the time over to you, and I'm going to stick here and make sure that if you need any help, which is unlikely, that I can provide it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve, and welcome to those of you who are attending this evening, and certainly glad to share my ideas with you. Now, I have very low vision, so if you, so I can't follow the chat and what you're asking me there. So you'll just have to kind of raise your hand and hope your mic works. And perhaps if somebody does have a mic that works, you can ask a question in behalf of someone whose mic doesn't work. But anyway, so I would love to be interrupted, and we can ask questions. Tonight I thought I would talk about the flat co-taught teaching experiences, which is not the norm in the teaching world, but hopefully it could and ought to become a normal kind of process. So the norm, of course, now is the top-down teaching experience, direct teaching, where the teacher sits at the top and all the students are responding to the directions of that particular person. So there's definitely someone in command, and you do exactly what you're told to do. So we think of teachers who are working on content, the mastery of content such as history or science or some art history or something like that. And and particularly in online education, we have all this packaging going on, And of course, the way the online companies now are trying to make money is they design once and then they teach many times. So they'll spend the money up front and then amortize it over a number of users. And so we think of, so they'll provide the textbook, the lecture, the videos, or they will provide all the content that is necessary for mastery of whatever is being taught. And so they will, excuse me, they will then test so that they are certain that everyone masters the same amount of knowledge. And that's easily tested because you know in advance exactly what the learner is supposed to have done. And then there are those still in the top-down pyramidal structure where we're trying to master a skill. That could be a reading teacher or an industrial arts teacher or an art teacher trying to teach the skill of painting, or a music teacher trying to teach you how to play the piano. And of course they teach a skill, and then we as the students practice it, and then we keep all the repetition keeping going. Math is plug and chug math is the same way, and then we can assess the results where we are on whatever skill is being taught. So once in a while, top-down direct teaching instructors let kids out into an inquiry space. It's a little larger information space, but often these turn into what I call bird units. And so they allow kids to choose a topic. The kids create some sort of product, and then they do some oral presentation and they get a grade for that. So I call them bird units because you could pick a bird, and so you have the robin person or the robin group. You'd have the woodpecker person or the woodpecker group, and so they end up knowing a lot about the particular bird that they chose, but they don't know anything about birds in general. Now, theoretically, they should have learned that during the presentations, but I find that, lots of learners go to sleep in presentations, and so it's very difficult to build general knowledge. I was looking at some examples from a national organization who was trying to show short inquiry projects that would fill the Common Core, new Common Core standards here in the U.S. And the kids had done little research papers on a topic that they had chosen. And so, of course, as a librarian, I look at the references at the end. And out of the three of the four outstanding papers only quoted information from Wikipedia. And I thought, oh my, this is what inquiry is supposed to be. So I think I read a lot of educational literature, and it's all gauged to the isolated teacher in the isolated classroom. And this literature tries to help these teachers push up mastery. And it could be anything from, classroom management skills are a problem, and if you just fix that, more students will succeed. It could be, the techniques you're using. You could flip your classroom so that you could get more individualized help. All sorts of things, hundreds and hundreds of ideas that are constantly coming out on the market, and are retreads from things that we learned 10 years ago or whatever. So recently I've been conducting a research study. It was funded by the American Library Association. And in the phase one of this, I asked a bunch of teachers just when they are teaching alone in the classroom, what percent of their kids meet or exceed their highest expectations? For example, how many would succeed at the top level of some sort of rubric, or traditionally would achieve the A grade level? And I'm only about halfway finished, so you're looking at just maybe half of the data that's going to come in. But right now, it looks like about 54% of the students actually achieve a teacher's highest expectation when that teacher is alone in the classroom. That is so that it's about half of your students who are going to succeed, and of course everybody worries about this percentage rate because of whatever national tests are coming up, particularly the PISA, which is international. The U.S. scores down quite a ways compared with other nations, and so I thought this was an interesting figure. So excuse me, there's those sorts of learning experiences which are not going to go away anytime soon, and I don't think should go away. I mean, there's a place for direct teaching, but I'm going to talk about an alternative that I think has, in the 21st century, is not only possible, but I think it's an urgent agenda to put on education's strategies that are being worked on. Anyway, so I'll call them flat and networked co-teaching experiences. And so what do I mean by that? Well, first you realize that kids of all stripes are now all over the world, are in this real world of networks. And that, of course, has a number of characteristics. And as soon as a kid gets a device and is connected, and not all kids are, and teenagers, but as soon as that happens, the potential of world-changing education immediately happens, and the opportunities are great. So right now, everybody is saying, we have the opportunity to learn anything at any time that we want to. For example, at a maker fair in New York City, I met this fellow who he was taking his produce into New York City from New Jersey, his New Jersey farm, and he would sell it. And then on his way back out, he would collect the used vegetable oil from McDonald's and other places, and he would take it out to his farm, and then he had this distilling mechanism that turned that used vegetable oil into the fuel for his tractors. And I said to him, because he had a demonstration there of all the jars of dirty vegetable oil on one end, and about 10 jars, and the last one was the actual fuel that he could use in his tractors. And he described the molecular structure that was going on as the oil goes through. He could talk to any petrochemical engineer anywhere in the world, and I said to him, well, how on earth did a farmer, how on earth did you learn this? And he says, oh, on the internet. You can learn anything on the internet. So, this is what's going on, and informal learning is now starting to worry some people. What is the future of formal education versus informal education? So let's take pieces of this and just take a quick look. So one of the major pieces that we're looking at is the self-directed learner, who is like our New Jersey farmer. They're ready to put in the time and effort to learn what they want to learn because they have a reason to learn it right now. And they will spend inordinate amount of time and effort in learning something that they actually want to. And there are really, as I look at this, what are we trying to develop in the self-directed learner? And the first thing is what I would call personal expertise, and that's always been around. That in top-down teaching, you're working on the individual. What's their fluency level in reading? What's their math capabilities, etc. So every kid that's coming through any kind of education has to put something on the table and bring something to the workplace or to their future. And so that's always been there, and it will continue to be there. It becomes even more important in a flat networked world because people are looking for solid, good advice or techniques or that they can trust. And so the person putting that out on the world networks, we're always looking for the best advice or the best things, and there's plenty of junk and bad advice out there. The second level is the cooperative group worker. And this is the person who may work at McDonald's or could work in a factory, and they are in charge of one thing, and that is putting the lettuce on the hamburger, or pushing the button on the French fries, and taking them off out of the oil at precise time. So cooperating means I take my piece, and my lettuce has to be perfect because the product must work and be to specs. If I were working in an airplane manufacturing outfit, I would have to take my gear, and it would have to meet absolute tolerant specifications, because when it gets put into the engine or whatever, where it's going to go, it has to fit, it has to work, it has to be reliable, etc. So kids need to develop this cooperative group work. It is learning to build my piece and to add it to another piece, and the whole thing's going to work. But then there's another level which is not often built in K-12 education, and it's the reason I think where a lot of the most best and brightest, like Thomas Edison, and they failed out of school because they're just so bored. And that's what I call collaborative intelligence. This is group work, obviously, but the product is not the hamburger, or it's not the precise piece that fits into an airplane. It is a new idea. It is true innovation. It's the iPad. So, Steve Jobs had a vague idea about iPad, but he gathers around him this group of thinkers and doers, and together they build something that none of them could have created individually. In other words, they build off themselves, they combine their expertise, they build expertise together, and they come out with this new invention. And I think the world is after this type of person. I mean, there will always be jobs for the cooperative group work person who can, put things together precisely. But more and more, we need people who are able to tackle the major problems of the world, like hunger and water and climate change and just to survive, etc. So there's this whole world of self-directed learners is a different kind of breed than we are creating in the top-down classroom. So another thing that's going on is this the expanded information and technology environment. So this makes the flat world flat because everyone, your location, the location you have, the physical location fades as you start making connections to other like minds throughout the world. So, why do we need, the question comes up, do we need brick and mortar schools anymore? And of course we do, but the opportunities to connect with people and the kids all over the world is essentially here. And yet we have teachers who are saying, well, within the confines of my 30 students in my walls, I have to produce these master learners, when sitting the possibilities of expanding out into the world of information far beyond the textbook. For example, you throw a textbook in front of 30 students, and you got half in the class, particularly, well, here in the U.S., you've got, maybe 10, 15, 20 languages spoken. You've got kids all over the map as far as their ability levels. And you think if you throw a textbook at them, a single textbook, you've already put a wall up that, you'll be lucky to get 54% of your kids, simply because the tools you use, could not be scaled by, a large group of your learners. And so suddenly the possibilities of providing all kinds of connections in various levels, types of information, differentiation, all that stuff exists. So another part of this whole flat thing is the access to what I call co-teachers. That's at least two adults working simultaneously with a group of learners. And immediately people say, oh, we couldn't afford to have two teachers in front of the classroom. Well, one of the best secret or least known secrets about Finland's education is they have a lot of situations where there are two adults in front of the classroom, and you think, oh, well, why don't we hear about that? Well, because nobody wants to suggest that might be a reason why Finland is so high on the scale, because our country couldn't afford that kind of thing, to have two teachers. They can barely afford one and two. But, however, just a couple of weeks ago, I visited a Maryland high school, and they were doing, and I'm not going to tell you who they are, but I'll just tell you they're in Maryland, and they are in an urban area, and so they have about 30 languages spoken, and they get every day somebody's coming in that doesn't know a single word of English. So they have these huge challenges. So they were not doing well under the Bush administration's No Child Left Behind, and so because they were such a failing school, they had to reorganize themselves. So that gave the principal an opportunity to clear the deck. All teachers were fired, and you had to reapply if you wanted to teach at that school. And that was a real boon, because they wanted to really test out the idea of co-teaching. So they created about 6 classrooms. They're called collaborative teaching rooms. And in these rooms, you've got either a language arts teacher or a math teacher. And then the co-teacher in either one of those subjects is either a special ed or an ELL, a foreign language, English as a second language, ESL, teacher. So you got 2 adults. One is kind of a specialist, and the other is a content specialist. And so I visited their rooms, and they do know how to co-teach. The kids have a hard time knowing which is the content specialist and which is the skill specialist, because they're both working working constantly with groups. And what they, so they've been at this now 6 years, and this is what they say. 6 years ago, they had zero of the kids in trouble pass any kind of, these second language kids pass any of the tests that were going on. And now after 6 years in honing this, these classrooms, they have 20% of the kids coming from zero English to math competence, passing the year's test. Now that is pretty significant, except the problem is they got extra funds to do this, and the more successful they get at it, the fewer the funds are. So they're kind of in a quandary. What do we do next? So this is an all-year kind of thing. So I got to interview a few students who happened to be sitting in the library, and at a table there were four kids during lunch, and 3 of them had been in these kinds of experiences. And they said they are the best classes they have in the school, and of course they give the logical reasons, because they can get more help, and so because they can get more help, they make a lot more progress and are able to do something. Of course, this is not rocket science, right? It just makes sense. So let's think about these. There's a librarian in that same school, but she has a different role. She co-teaches too, but she has to spread herself. She can't stay with one class all year long like these others do. She has to embed herself, in various classes across the faculty are teaching across the entire curriculum. So she's like other specialists in most schools who might have a teacher librarian, or they might have a technology integration specialist, or there could be something called the instructional coach, or there might be a reading specialist, or even a counselor. So, most schools have some sort of specialist who, and the thing that unites or is common among these people is they have responsibilities across the school and across the faculty, and so they can only make a difference as they actually embed themselves into learning or projects. Now, the problem with these people, excuse me, the problem with these people is that they often have agendas of their own that take up a lot of their time. For example, the teacher librarian has the collection to worry about, has the space to manage, and all sorts of things. The technology integration specialist might have, machines galore all over the building, trying to keep them up and going, and the network's operational. The instructional coach might sit in on classes and then give recommendations and does reports of all kinds. The reading specialist may take kids isolated into reading skill programs, so it doesn't really have time to integrate reading, across the. Anyway, so these people have other agendas. So how are you going to have these people embed themselves, and why should they? Now, my argument for doing this is that when you combine a content specialist teacher with a skilled specialist, you get this, what's happening in this sort of model here. So you've got the content knowledge in the kids here. They come into a learning experience either totally uninformed, and you're trying to push them toward deep understanding. Now, you're going to get kids in all along that continuum. So if you got my grandson, in your class, he would already be at the right here, and so you tell him what he has to know, and he already knows it, and so he immediately, you have a problem as the teacher, and he has a problem with you because he's totally bored. On the bottom, you might have our specialists who are specialists at teaching how to read, or librarians who are teaching inquiry kinds of things. So how to find really good information and what to do with it when you've found it, and how to use various forms of technology to actually boost what you're doing. When you get a co-teaching pair of a content specialist and a process specialist together, what one does, what the learning, the skills on the bottom actually push up the content skills. So they're going to, the idea is to use the skill to boost the actual content that is outlined to learn. And when, the best time to learn something, the best time to use the skill is when you're trying to learn something, and then, you get better results. At least that's the theory, and it works most of the time. Not always, but... So let's go back to our little study. So we ask teachers and teacher librarians in our study, when you co-teach together, take an actual sample unit. What were a few of your goals and objectives? And so when you got through, again, how many, what percent of those learners that you had in that co-taught learning experiences achieved your highest level? So again, we're looking at the highest level of the rubric or the traditional kind of A level. Just look at the difference. I mean, remember, it was 54% when you teach alone, and this is not the final. Remember, this is only about half of the data in. But look at the difference when you put two mentors to work in a group. That is, I think that's hugely successful. I mean, that is something worth shouting about to everyone in the school, to parents, and even to the kids. So, what do you do with these specialists who you have and who have agendas of their own? I have the recommendation that you have all the specialists in the school, the librarians, the reading specialists, the tech folks, actually do co-taught learning experiences together with 50% of their time. So if I were working an 8-hour day, 4 hours ought to be spent doing actual collaboration experiences, because that you would then have this track record of your impact on learning in the school. And so, for example, for librarians, shelving books and circulating them, is not going to make two hoots of difference in the learning that's going on. But when you get involved with an actual learning experience and get those books off the shelves and read, and, something is going to start happening in heads, and that's what you're all about. So you're trying to say to each specialist, don't tell me how to do it, walk with me, and we will not only collaborate, but we're going to document, and then we're going to collaborate again, and we're going to document again, and brick by brick. If one is successful at the 81% level, that's one brick, and I start building this track record among all the specialists in the school until and so you're saying to the faculty and to the parents, I mean, you spent money buying us as specialists, and here's the difference that we make. And so every time I touch a learning experience as a specialist, it turns to gold. And we see the results that appear. So, so here's a hint I have for all administrators, around the world, and that is to buy or hire these specialists who not only have skills but know how to actually collaborate and teach alongside and mentor kids and demonstrate that they're doing. That's what they did in the Maryland school, and they were able to make a huge impact. And if they found somebody who they spoke in the interview, talked a great game, but then could not produce, they would say to that person, well, there's probably a different space for you, in education. It's just not in the kind of collaborative participatory culture we have at this school. So they've grown this participatory culture school on purpose, and have the administrators just push that and allow people to experiment and take risks and all sorts of stuff. So it's the people you hire that make the huge difference. And of course, I recommend that you turn your library into a learning commons. And what is a learning commons? Well, it turns from just a storage and retrieval space and a circulation space of things into a very high-level learning space, so that there are simultaneous projects going on in many little alcoves, or so the furniture all moves, everything moves, so that by at 8 o'clock in the morning, there might be one configuration of individuals, small groups, and large groups working in this place. By 9 o'clock, it's a different physical space because you can move stuff around. And so it's a very busy, productive space where all the specialists are officed. And this is where they do a lot of their actual co-teaching learning experiences, both here and in the various classrooms. So every teacher considers this as the extension of their classroom, where things are done, not just tended, for example, kids coming for a half hour of library time, etc., etc. So it turns this place. And there's an equal, not only a physical place, but a very participatory virtual learning commons that goes along with this. So instead of a library website that connects you into databases and is kind of a one-way stream, you build this participatory culture in the webs where all kinds of learning experiences are happening and things are being built, etc., etc. Another hint I have to make this whole thing work is to really open up the technology. And we've gone through a phase, at least in the United States, where the tech directors just have locked everything down. So, I mean, they built this network and then they don't let anybody use it because they're afraid that it will be misused. So I say, well, why do you build it in the first place if you don't open it? But I think we're really looking at a different kind of person that's coming into tech directorships, I think now. We're getting a lot more educators rather than the super systems people. And when you get an educator in here, they start understanding how you open this and you open that, and you allow bring your own device now is coming into its own, so that every kid in the world who has a smartphone or even a regular phone can start participating in their education rather than closing it all down. So that's one of the major principles that has to happen if you're going to have flat instruction. There's also another thing that has to happen, and that's you do different kinds of instructional designs in a flat world than you would do in a top-down world. I'll just show you a couple and give you some examples. One I call is the Knowledge Building Center, and this is an online, just a Google site, and you could build it in any sort of technology. Doesn't have to be. You can Google if you want to see this template and draw it down and take a look at it. It's free. It's up on Google. Just Google Knowledge Building Center, and you'll find what you see here on the screen. And it has different rooms, and in each one of these rooms, the kids, the teacher, the classroom teacher, and the teacher librarian, other specialists, maybe experts from the community can be working. The parents can be in here, and so and kids from other schools can be in here. So it's truly you build this place where everybody can be learning and growing and constructing and sharing and figuring out the problem solving together. So you can take this. On each one of the pages are some suggestions of what might go there, but you grab this and get the idea and then create ones of your own. Another flat kind of learning experience is what I call a book to cloud, and this is a place where curation happens. This is where you take a piece of text or a novel or a document or something that is really a challenge, and you you divide it into small pieces and have kids curate as individuals or small groups. They curate around the piece, trying to teach everybody else in the room what this particular their piece means, and then they put it all together. One example is Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and so one of these book to cloud, and again you can Google this and you can see all kinds of examples and you can use them and create your own. But in Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, what I did is I took each phrase of that address, which has meanings in 1863 that the kids need to understand, and so each phrase of that speech is in a different room, and that room is empty when the kids come into it, and it's their job to fill that room with ways to understand the significance of the phrase they were assigned. And then we put it all together so that we deeply understand a complex text or a novel, chapter by chapter, or an idea, idea by idea that goes on. So anyway, the notion here is to curate and assign for individual students to take much more responsibility for teaching each other pieces and parts. There's another one I created called Quick Moocs, and here you see again you can just duplicate duplicate this instructional design. And when you come into this environment, you come in and there's an umbrella question there, like what do we know about climate change? So you're asking a whole body of students a major question under which they can then build their own questions that they are going to pursue either as individuals or groups. And then you take them into a getting started place where there's just enough overview or to build their background knowledge, just enough to get them started, and that helps them build even better questions, so they're refining their questions as they go. Then you take them into the gallery where there are many rooms where they can work and find information and find all kinds of resources, and they participate in these rooms. It's not what I, the teacher, am putting there. It's what they are curating, again, into each one of these rooms. So these rooms are conversations and places of, and they don't have to go into every room. Because they are pursuing their own question, they might go into one or two or three of these rooms, but not the other. So choice is constant. And then they go into the workshop. What are they going to do now? What kind of a project or what kind of a product would they create together to inform the entire class? And then you notice on the left there's this blog that's going on. And then they finally end this with a big think, a look back after they've finished this big learning experience. You know, what did I learn? What did we learn? How did I learn? How did we learn? And that is a fabulous model for doing these flat kinds of things. I'm going to go back, and I meant to put another slide in there, but I'm sure that all of you have encountered maker spaces. And again, the idea of maker spaces is this flat world. So you put a disruptive technology into the Learning Commons, former library, and it's a place where kids are building and constructing. And you know, you put a 3D printer in there, and you say, I don't know how to run it. Who's gonna figure out what this thing does? So kids get around and start tinkering, and so you know, they go from being users of a technology to tinkerers on a technology to an actual experimentation level on technology, and finally they become entrepreneurs. And so the whole idea in a makerspace is a really flat learning experience. Now, if I don't know it, who can help me do it? Who has the knowledge to help? What do we need to construct? You know, it's all this stuff on robotics and Arduinos and strawberry pies and all this sort of stuff that is starting to make a huge difference in education. So I see a hand. Talk to me.
Hi, David. It's Steve. So I thought I'd set an example and show people that they can raise their hand and ask you a question. I'm interested in the makerspace specifically as it relates to the tension between individual competency and achievement and collaboration, because it feels like the Maker Faire sort of manifests both, and in some ways shows that individual study and competency and deep learning are kind of a prelude or a prerequisite to the collaboration. How does that match your model?
Well, it matches perfectly, because what's happening is as you're developing yourself and you're working on a problem with others, you know, you're developing simultaneously your own personal expertise, because you have to go out and learn. When a problem confronts a group and nobody knows how, everybody has to go out and investigate. And that, you know, so everybody's building, you know, everybody takes on this project, and they understand that everybody in the group has to work toward some sort of solution. So it's not a separate, it's not one thing you learn, you know, yesterday and you're prepared for today. It's simultaneously working, building collaborative intelligence along with personal expertise. So these are not antithetical. They join each other, and so that's really, really important. I think what is the whole thing that's going on here, I think, is you know, we're looking at you know, what a teacher alone can do in a classroom, like, and that equals a 1, and that's the success. It's too bad that the success rate in our little project is only 54%. You wish it were higher. But if you add another person to this mix with a different expertise level, then you're starting to put puzzle pieces together. And what really starts to happen is that 1 + 1 = 3, not 2. because you're getting the mentors start bouncing off each other. Students start to take more ownership of their own learning, and so the result is more than you had in the past. And so I think the flat co-taught learning experience is really something that ought to be in the repertoire of every school, as long as we do have brick and mortar schools. And particularly in online education, a lot of times there's just one mentor. I mean, the package is there. All the mentor does, my grandson, he had to complete a financial literacy course online. He was very conscientious. He just did the work. It was horrible. He hated it, but he just did the work. His friend found out that in the online, the same course, that it didn't matter. The mentor who was grading it, supposedly, wasn't even looking at anything. So he just would write, Mary Jane went to the park to do something, and he'd pass that in, and he'd get an A. And so, it was not being mentored at all. So that's the way he got through the class. So, I think there's a whole different world of using technology in new ways, adult mentors in new ways, and I'm just, in my own classes, I see the results every semester compared to the results I had 10 years ago when I didn't have all the tools that I have now. Questions? We're about out of time, but we have a little time.
So if you have a question for David, you can click on the talk button. We've given you all microphone privileges, and feel free to just grab the mic and ask a question, or you can put a question in the chat. David, are you familiar with Sugata Mitra's experiments with the kiosks in India, where just by adding a young woman who had no expertise in the subject matter but just facilitated the students, significantly increased their learning?
I sure am, and he keeps working on this idea of just putting a tool out there and letting kids try to figure it out. And I do believe that there's possibilities with that, and of course he demonstrates that, but he doesn't demonstrate it for the entire village. He sees that happen in a few students that are in the village. And, any technique that we use, not only the ones I've talked about, but any other technique, will reach a certain number of learners at a certain depth level. So I think, yes, I think it's absolutely wonderful. I have teacher librarians, one I'm thinking of in New York, that has this I-team, and she's got 75 young middle schoolers who have this problem of testing out all kinds of technology and spreading it throughout the school. And so they are wonderful. To get on the team, she has a waiting list. She has 75 in the club. She has a waiting list a mile long, and you have to be a great student. No, you're not a geek. Anybody with any kind of ability can be on it, even a disabled kid. But what you have to do is you have to have your homework done, and you have to be a model student in the school, and then you're into this club where you learn technologies yourself, and then you spread them throughout the school, and you are the tech squad, and you teach teachers, and you teach your fellow kids, and you man the Genius Bar and all kinds of stuff. So there's 100 techniques to do all this, but it's all about the self-directed learner and getting a higher percentage of kids to be self-directed learners than we've had in the past. We've got to have a lot more inventors, and we've got to have a lot more out-of-the-box thinkers if we're going to keep this whole thing going.
So we have just a couple of minutes left. If you have a question for David, please feel free to grab the microphone. Click on the talk button underneath in the audio-video box, or you can put a note in the chat. I guess what I was interested in, David, were the he goes through a similar process where he identifies that the students, this is Sugata Mitra, learn a certain amount on their own, but just through the introduction of a caring young adult who's not a content expert, there's, again, this sort of dramatic increase in learning.
And that's true. And of course, all teachers understand that too, don't they? That if they really encourage students all they can, they get more work as long as the kid believes them. And but yes, he's famous for the grandmothers, the English grandmothers, who just stand back and say, "Oh, you're doing such wonderful work," and that kind of spurs them on. And that's, of course, a good part of motivation. But you'll get just as much or much more, I think, with the content. And you know, if you're trying to build an airplane, you got to have more, and you don't know much about aerodynamics. You got to have somebody more than a grandmother helping you. But a grandmother always helps, right? So anyway.
If I think about my own experiences in self-direction, it makes me wonder if there's an inherent tension between sequential curricular expectations and self-direction. I find that for myself, self-direction involves a lot of kind of freedom to think and explore independently. How does that kind of work?
Well, every kid needs to come into command of their own learning, and that's why I know schools. In the Maryland high school, I ran into a kid who was taking a self-directed course, and he was in charge of his own learning. So that school had figured out that there's not only the scheduled classes that you have, but you have to provide time and a place for the independent self-directed learner who already is coming into command of their own learning. In other schools, I know that you'll have 8 or 10 learners together, and each of them are on their own projects, and every Friday they meet and report to each other on the progress they're making. I think, you know, to have one plan of schooling now is becoming very obsolete. And the more self-directed, you know, there are some kids that are not self-directed, but could learn it. And those are the ones you want to, you know, you want to find the Steve Hargadons and turn them loose and see what you get. And you're going to get something that's absolutely fabulous, at least in the case of Steve. Huh?
Oh, you're always so complimentary. David, thank you very much. We've got another keynote coming up in 3 minutes. I think we'll give people a chance to take a short break. I'm going to clap for you. I really appreciate that you are front and center here as we're looking at learning across the different arenas. And sure appreciate you and your work. Thank you so much.
You bet. And congratulations on your series, and good night.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody. Amy has put a link in the chat to the next session, which is Cindy Mediavia, and it's Learning by Doing. Great follow-up to this session. And I'm going to turn the recorder off.